I'm Mar, and once again, this is my opinion. Published in 1844, The Raven is one of Edgar Allan Poe's most well-known poems. When examining the prose's wording, the first thing that stands out is Poe's use of alliteration and rhyme. Line 1 gives the reader a perfect example of both. Weak and weary both begin with W, and their close placement is alliteration. Weary also rhymes with dreary, causing the literary devices to be linked from the work's beginning. The doubling of alliteration and rhyme continues throughout the prose. Example, deep in darkness for alliteration, peering and fearing for rhyme. Combined, the pair allows the poem's words to flow melodically. One cannot help but read The Raven in a musical fashion. The title bird is worthy of deep discussion. From the moment he flies into the poem, the narrator's curiosity is piqued by the raven. The narrator describes the bird as stately from the saintly days of yore. This description informs the reader that the raven is dignified and most likely supernatural. To add to this, the bird perches on a bust of Athena, daughter of Zeus and Greek goddess of wisdom. To use stage terminology, this is an interesting blocking choice on Poe's part, and it serves as foreshadowing for the poem's later stanzas. As the poem continues, the narrator becomes frustrated by the raven's inability or refusal to answer his questions, simply cawing the iconic phrase, "Nevermore," repeatedly. This changes the narrator's impression of the bird, referring to the avian creature as a grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore. While bogged down with descriptors, this passage informs the reader that the narrator is now displeased and frightened by the raven's presence, seeing the bird as an omen of disastrous repute. The raven is still supernatural, but of hell, not heaven. The narrator's impression aside, what does the raven stand for? After rereading the text, the answer becomes obvious. The raven is the personification of the narrator's grief. Sometime before the work began, Lenore, implied to be the narrator's wife or fiancée, passed away. The narrator now begins to read old literary works, hoping to find cerise of sorrow. Cerise translates as cessation, so the narrator is attempting to cast out his sorrow. Once the raven appears, his presence torments the narrator, pecking at his sanity as only grief can. With these words, the narrator is attempting to permanently drive the bird away, and in doing so, end his internal suffering. This attempt fails. The raven remains perched, and thus grief remains. This is a deep sentiment. Everyone has encountered grief in their lives at one point, usually from the death of a loved one. While we mourn the loss, a part of that loss never goes away. How much depends on the circumstances. An untimely death would be towards the top of the list. Poe lost his young wife to tuberculosis, and certain accounts state he never fully recovered from her death before meeting his own. While she lived when Poe composed The Raven, she had contracted the illness. In that regard, The Raven is Poe's statement about what he was about to experience. While it might appear he moved on, like the ebony bird, his grief would remain evermore.